Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video M2A 527 I will be recreating a photo I took in the forest recently, this one here, and I will be rendering that, trying to get the same depth of field working and setting up the spider web, and I'll also add some water drops on it, and then my subject in the frame will pop, or that's the plan. So this is what I have been creating or rendering and testing with. So I've created this spider web, I added the droplets, and then I just added a backdrop and then some simple lighting setups just to get some nice kind of like a sunset feel, like there's like some warmth coming from the right, and then kind of a blue light which should be, I don't know, the ambience or whatever. It's just something to make it more interesting. This will be a short Houdini tutorial how to set up the spider web. I'm just actually recreating a tutorial I found on Vimeo. It's not that I want to show you how to set it up, it's just very fast to do so, and then I'll be adding the droplets in Houdini 2. But then we will be exporting all of that into an Alembic cache, and then we will be rendering this with M2A in Arnold. So we will be setting up the shaders and the lights and everything in Maya. So this is not a Houdini tutorial, it is based for M2A, so I will just quickly create the scene or the spider web and the droplets in Houdini, and then we go back to Maya. So before we jump in, I just want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon channel, where you will always find the source files if needed. So whenever you need to, let me just see if I can actually minimize this. Let's see. There we go. And then minimize. Doesn't work. Alright, so on my Patreon channel you can find the source files for everything, so I'll be tagging everything. So you will get obviously the tutorials on here, the links to YouTube, but then you will also get these little Dropbox folders where you have access to all the scene files. And this tier you can sign up for is not just for that one tutorial, it's actually you get the scene files for all the source files I have ever uploaded on Patreon. So keep that in mind, it's not just for a single tutorial. Once you sign up for this tier, you will get all the source files, and you can find the most recent ones or the later ones by the tagging system on Patreon channel. And one last thing is I have my Katana course right on here. It's right now on a 73% special off if you want to sign up for this. The link will be in the description below and also on this YouTube video. So let's just jump quickly into Houdini and set everything up for that little spider web. So I will fairly quickly jump over all this, so I don't want to go into that much detail. I'll be going and explaining as I go. So I'm just creating a geo node in here so that we are on the correct location. Go in here, create a draw node, draw curve I think it's called, and then I just want to draw from the top down. Right now this is sideways, so I will change the projection to be on the ZX plane, which is a top down view. And I'm drawing with a Wacom tablet. It's a lot easier to draw circles or like a spiral. I'm sure there's better ways, and you do need to do this fully procedural, but this way I have some creative freedom to actually draw what I intend to. So if I go back to this kind of thing, you can see that I need these center lines or these structure lines, webs from the outside, so it's kind of a cross or like a star pattern like this, and then after that I will be drawing like a spiral circle. And the more time you spend on this, the more accurate or nicer looking it will get. So I'm just trying to do this as good as I can. So if I'm on this node, I hit enter, I'm going into the drawing mode, and now what I can do, I can just draw across. I have Ctrl+Z shortcut handy to just undo the line until I'm satisfied. So I'm just crossing this, doing all these things. This one is a bit offset, so I'm just trying to kind of center these lines as good as I can. And as I said, I'm using a Wacom tablet. It makes it a lot easier. And keep in mind that user error is pretty good. It will just add more realism to your spiderweb in general. So don't be afraid of shaky lines or whatnot. Alright, so this is now my top-down view. And now what I will be doing next is just starting off from the center And this might take a bit of time, so I'm trying to do it fairly quick. I'll just be going in circles just to create the spiral web. So let's just start by, let's just recreate this guy. And now I'm just starting to draw, and obviously the more time you take, the better it will look, the more detail you will do or get. So I'm just trying to fairly quickly just, you can see how egg-shaped this already is. And then the closer you put these lines together, the more detail and more complexity you will get to this whole spider web. And the idea is to draw these shapes up and then actually have a simulation take over to create the force, the tension, and the depth to all this. So we're just creating a really basic structure, and then we will pass this into a vellum, which is pretty new to Houdini, into a vellum hair constraint solver, which will generate us the desired effect of a spider web. So once we have drawn the circle, we will actually be selecting each of the endpoints and constraining them to the world space or whatnot, and then based off that they will hang down and the simulation will take over. So let me just finish off the last one here, and we just stop here. And what you can also do, which kind of helps a bit, you can just add some intersections to this. So you could maybe just do these kind of things, or like do this again, like just connect these ones over, and then you can do this kind of thing. It just adds a bit of detail and complexity to the whole spider web. You can also do like something like this, and all of this will come together just right now. So if I hit enter again and I just view from here, so this is now the spider web on the plane. So what we can do next is we want to resample those points. Right now they are spread out and it's not really very uniform based on the speed I draw those curves. So next up is we can actually just create a resample node, which will add uniform point numbers to this. Like that, we can add the detail or the amount we need based on the length here. And the more, obviously, the longer everything will take. So we don't need too many, we just need enough to make it kind of work, like for our fuse process. Fuse is kind of like a weld, so I'm just creating this fairly quick. And this will just combine neighboring points or snapping them together like that. And then you can see we get these nice connections everywhere. And sometimes this works better when you don't go so aggressive on this. Maybe something like that. And then the next point would be to create the vellum. So in the vellum menu, there is like a hair, configure hair thing. You just create that. And then there's also a vellum solver here, and you just create those two nodes. And then in the vellum hair, you have the option to actually pin some points. So I'm hitting this arrow here. And then on my outside ones, I'm just selecting them with shift. These will be the ones where the spider web is hanging down from, like that. But before we want to actually start simulating this, I want to transform this a bit, just because gravity will take effect and it will bend differently than when it's a bit skew. Because the spider webs in nature are not actually flat on the ground, they are like kind of tilted in a way. So I'm hitting enter now to create these or storing those points. And I will create a transform node before we go into the hair constraint. I can view from this, and what I want to do now is just I kind of want to replicate the angle of my reference here. It's kind of tilted downwards in the foreground and then goes up backwards, so I can just hit enter in this guy, and I just want to angle it kind of the same way. It's a bit to the side and a bit skew like that. We can go maybe a bit more aggressive on this. Let's see if I rotate a bit further, like that. So this is kind of the layout I want to go for. And then back in the vellum hair solver, we still have my points selected. And now if I just hit play, I'm viewing from the vellum solver at the bottom. And if I hit play, everything should just fall to the simulation. And you can see it's just falling, and it kind of just works just out of the box, right? This is now my little spider web sim. It's obviously a bit too dangly. There's no stiffness to this. So what we can do in the hair constraint, we can just control the stiffness or the rest length actually. So let's go with maybe a 0.8 rest length scale. This should add more tension to the initial constraints. And you can see now it's not hanging down as much as it has been before. It's still not enough in my opinion. So let's just go down maybe to 0.6 in the stretch. And let's just resim this quickly. You can see now it's nice and bouncy. And I think this is pretty good for what I want to show you guys. And now I can just stop the simulation, and once I'm happy with the result, I can just use that and I can just export this as well. So there's a Vellum IO thing which actually exports it. Let's just go in here. Oops. And this guy, so in this you can just export this to an Alembic if you need to, and we will be doing this in a bit. I just want to know from this thing, I just want to create some points to get these little droplets of water. So right now this is my surface. What I can do now is just creating a scatter node, and from the Vellum, I guess from here, I can just generate points on the surface of the spider web, and I can randomize them by removing the relax iteration, so it's just not so uniform or spread out randomly or more randomly like that. And then I can just create a, let's just delete adders first. I think this is the one we need. Or was it delete? It's attribute delete. So let's just create attribute delete right here. This node will just get rid of all the Vellum attributes which we don't need now. So I can just get rid of everything, I think. Oops. Like that. So now we just have the points, which is perfect. Now we scatter them, and I want to have a copy sub which will copy points. I want the points in here, and then I just create a little sphere like that, and I hook this up, view it, and now I have this sphere scattered everywhere. Next thing is to create a random attribute. So you can use a point wrangle or the random attribute randomizer. It's up to you. So let's just do attribute. There should be attribute randomize like that. Create this, change the name to p-scale, and now we just want to have one dimension, and we want to have min-max values, so 0.001 maybe, like that. And now you can already see we have random scales everywhere. You can check the spreadsheet too, and we have random p-scales, which just gives us random random sizes of the spheres. So if I now would make the Vellum like that, I think it's called ghosting, you can see the scale of those spheres, and I think they are pretty good. We can just make them slightly bigger, maybe 0.04, maybe 2 then, 0.02, 0.01, 1.5, and the min value shouldn't be 0, it should be 0.05 maybe. So we always have a min and max, and this would be my water droplets. I can also offset them a bit if I need to, and to do that I would need to offset them based on the normal angle. So what I can do, I just create a normal saw like here, make sure I create points on normals on the points like that, and then what I can do is a point wrangle. Point wrangle, and this node just iterates over each point to give us some kind of offset. So if I view from here, what I can do is I can change the p value, and I can multiply, I think, let me just get this together quickly. As it turns out, the normal attribute doesn't work on just the curves here, so we will need to do that, and I will show it in a bit on the hero asset we will have in the center right here. So these would be my points which I want to export, so I just need to make sure that I'm actually outputting polygons, so make sure this is a polygon mesh, kind of like that. So these would be nice droplets. So this would be my my other export. So I would need to do a output node here, geometry output like this. I can put this to the right location. This would be going into the Houdini folder like that, and I'll just call this this would be, let's accept this, and we just call this let's say droplets droplets.abc like that. And if I run this now, this will export them to disk, and I want to do the same in the Vellum IO thing. So this will go to the same folder, should go to the HIP file like that, and we just say spiderweb.abc, which will export that. So this is my output here. We just want a single frame, so let's just do current frame. Same, this should be on render current frame. So if I just save this to this should export everything, same as here. And the next thing what I want to do is I need to bring in the a hero asset, and I have a website where I'm grabbing this from, and I will show you right now. So for quick models or something like that, I'll just always go to this website here, and I'm just looking for like spider or something like that. And there were quite a few things I could grab from. So you can use anything you see in here. So there was one bubble hat or something I was finding, which I used for the tutorial. So nothing too crazy actually. So you can use anything, any model. So I was using this guy, Spider-Man Marvel bubble hat. But just for the fun of this, let's just I just reuse this, so we don't need to mess around with anything. So feel free to upload or download anything in here, and I'll just be bringing in the guy here quickly. So I just imported that and unpacked it. So this is kind of where he is and how he looks. So I was using this guy. So all I gotta do now is just move him. I think he's not really in the same position where my spider web is. So if I just view this, he's up right here. So we just gotta place him, and the spider web should be kind of placed like this according to the reference images. So I just need to transform him so we have him in a nice location like that. So I'll just be moving him down slightly like that, and then he's already in place. Let's just rotate him. It doesn't need to be perfectly in this location, but just something like which works would be good enough. Maybe a bit more down. Yeah, so his heels are on the web, so this is a good location, I think. So now what we want to do is we just want to put the same scatter on this guy. So let's just check if he actually has normals now. So let's see, no normals on him, so we would be creating those like that, and make sure you create them on points. So let's see if he gets them now. So now we have normals. So the next thing would be to scatter points again like we did before. So I can just copy this. I can actually copy the whole stream, honestly. I can just copy this whole thing, copy this, paste it in here, scatter this like so, and then this would be, we just rename this to droplets bobble hat or something like that, and just have a look how the scatter works. Scattering points, it might be too uniform, so we can play around with the iterations. We want something more like this. We don't want so many points. Let's check how the scale is. It looks like that. We can have a bit larger droplets for this guy, so the the values here, we can just increase them a bit like that. I'm not sure why this is a constant, not a constant, but anyways. So we have these points on here. We can actually visualize our little guy too, like that. So he's up there. So what I want to do now, I just want to offset them, and let's see if this actually works this time. If I just change my scale, it's a bit too large like that. And what I want to do now is just I want to offset them based on their normal. So let's see if we can get this to work this time. So if I create the point wrangle again, like that, and all I want to do is I just want to keep the existing point position, and I just want to append it with the normals like that, and I want to multiply this with the add p scale attribute. And now you can already see that this just offset everything based on their normal angle. And you can control the offset by adding a little multiplier, which I want to do. I just call this CHF, which is a float slider, and I call this maybe distance, like that, distance, and it's defaulting to 0, so there's actually no offset. And then I can just control it like so. I can just offset them in the normal direction. So I just want them to be on top of the surface slightly, but not too much. So I can just use it like that, and it should be fine. So they are a bit more on the surface, and I can change my scatter seed if this is not good enough. Maybe something like that. And we can add maybe a few more dots. Okay, so this is now the dots for the little bobblehead. So what I want to do now is I want to also export the bobblehead. So I want to do it after the normal creation like this. And I just want to make sure that I give this a new name. So this would just, this would just be the bobble head like that. So now we have a few more rights. So I can just make sure I save this to disk, which is the geometry, and I save this to disk. And this should be all we gotta do. So if I now transition to Maya, so this would be my scene setup session, my scene setup tutorial or whatnot. And then if I bring in the Maya scene, which is just empty, we will be importing all those Alembic files, cache Alembic import. And we have all these guys in here already, so I'm just loading in the bobblehead. He's here. Then we import the next guy, the droplets, which are there. Next guy would be droplets on him. And last but not least is the spider web. Oops, that was doubling up. And the spider web. So now we have everything in place. And I don't have good names because I didn't name them in Houdini, but doesn't matter. So this would be my spider web. And the scale, if I create a sphere, let's see what the scale is. So this is 1 centimeter. This is the default scale. So actually the radius is 1 centimeter. So the whole distance is, the diameter is 2 centimeters. So obviously it's very, very tiny. If we want to do it real life, we want it maybe to be maybe 10 centimeters. So we would scale this up by a factor of 10, I guess. Maybe even a bit more. So if I scale this, so the spider is maybe a 1 centimeter big spider right now. I need to just multiply this again just to get to correct scaling. If I go to my channel box, which is somewhere hidden, there we go. So we have now 2.4. So we just need to make sure we can, I think, times equals 10, and we can scale this up by a factor of 10 like that. So this would be now a good scale for the scene. Let's just place him in the origin, something like that. Save it, and this would be my scene setup. So the next step would be to actually create a camera for this. So what you can do, you can roughly angle this. I think, let's try it. Maybe something like that. He's a bit to the side. I think this is a nice framing. And you can create the camera from view, Control Shift and C. So this creates your new perspective. We can call this main. And now I just want to lock it down like that. And I also want to display my frustum like this. I want to go to my shapes, to display, make sure I have a darker gate so it's easier to see what we're actually dealing with. So this is kind of the position I like, and this will kind of also be the render frame. So what I want to do next is I just want to move these points, the vertices of those lines, and not the point actually, I just want to grab the spider web itself, and I just want to move those vertices so they go into my camera space, so I get a nice looking depth of field. So this is the idea of this, moving them. And you don't need to be 100% accurate. I think if I look through this in perspective, this will not work nicely. So you would actually need to position them properly, checking the perspective as well. So I'm just kind of extending them. You could have plants there, you could have a tree trunk, you can have whatever, just to make sure you extend those curves nicely so they fit or they expand throughout the frustum. There's no droplets on here, but that doesn't really matter. So if I save this again, and I'll just open up my render settings, and I'll just load my default preset, which is not doing anything fancy, honestly. It's just setting a few default sample settings, rate f to 2, use existing TX files because I don't have any is off on default. Yeah, this is kind of, you can see there's nothing crazy going on. So if I start my Arnold render view right now, and I make sure I am on basic mode, and I hit play for initiating the render, you can see this is what we get. I want to make sure I have progressive refinement on, and for now I just want to test on 50% resolution, and then you can see that we don't get any wires. So problem one is we need to convert this or add this to an Arnold curve collector, which will find all the curves in here and converts them so Arnold can actually interpret them. So if I render this now like this, you should see the curve. You can also see that we are missing, let's just render back on 100%. You can see that we are missing quite a few of lines, and I can show you why that is. So first of all, the width is super thin now because we're on real scale. It's like thin as a hair. We can go maybe a bit thicker just for the tutorial. And you can see we're missing quite a few wires. So what you got to do is change your sample rate, increase that. So even this doesn't work. You get really round curves here. So let's go maybe 1,000. And we get all the detail we need. We can try if there's a difference if you go higher. I don't think so. What does 500 do? 500 is still very round, which is, I don't think it's supposed to be round. Let's just go with 1,000 and be good with that. So this is now how it's looking rendered. Let's just do 2,000, just see how this helps. Yeah, actually 2,000 is a bit better. We get a bit sharper edges here. All right, so this is kind of this, and the next step would be to set up the depth of field. And obviously what you can do is you just create a locator where you need it to be, where you want to have your focal point. So I go to my create menu, I go to locator, and I just snap it, you holding down V and middle mouse, click dragging this on just this dot in this between his eyes. This is my focal point. And then you can just measure the distance using the distance tool, or I have a little light shader tool which you can get from lightshaders.de. It's like a little helper tool set with quite a few helpful things. And there's a focus rig, so you select the camera first, then your locator, hit that, it creates your connection. It's actually almost 2 meters. It's strangely enough. So if I move the point, you can see the distance is updating, and so is the focal point. So if I render this now, hit play again, you can see now that the focus is being set up, and you can see now how it's defocusing here and there. So let's just quickly view through the camera, and I forgot to set the focal length. So on default it's I think 50 or something. It's actually, so let's move up, it's 35. We want to have a really nice zoom lens on this guy, so let's go for 105 macro lens, and we just zoom out slightly and make sure that we frame this guy again. So now we actually 4.6 meters back like that. And I just, as you can see, I just need to move those points again, control vertices, and move them back even more like that. These ones too, like that. Okay, so now they have been moved. You can see they are totally skew, and ideally what you do is do it properly. You would just do it in the right axis like this, and the same with this wire, and then upwards, something like that, so you have the correct trajectory of this. And yeah, so now we have the focal setup. So if I render this again, let's see what we get. We want to render through the main camera like this, frame it, and we're still missing, so I need to extend them even further to the back. Let's just do this quickly. I hope this is this one here. Yeah, you can see now how the distance is affected in the render. Moving it up. We're still not there yet. Just go really crazy. There we go. Okay, and the same for the other guy. Really extend those wires so everything is now nice. Okay, so now they're actually extending properly. So now we got to adjust the depth of field if you want to have a really crazy out of like focus, defocus. So in the main camera, you can just go down to your Arnold render settings on the bottom, and you can just go crazy on the aperture size. So if I do 5, you can see it gets really out of focus. We can do maybe 15, and then we get a really crazy effect. And this is kind of what I did for the tutorial. You can see how nicely it folds off, and we get the nice bokeh everywhere. You can change your aperture blades. Let's say I change it to 6, so we get the nice hexagon shapes and the bokeh effect. And the next thing would be to light this guy. So I don't have any lights in the scene right now, so let's do that. And I create them in the Arnold menu, lights. I want, let's see, I just create 3 lights, 1, 2, and 3. And I will do a open the render view, hit play again, and I make this into shaded mode, go into perspective. Why doesn't this update? Let's just try this again. Open render view, render this guy, go to the main camera. I'm not sure why it's not updating. I guess it is actually. I don't have any lights, that's why. So we go 50% resolution. We just keep this view in here. We can actually dock it if we need to. So let's just maybe dock it right here, so I have it in place. And if I now go to my first light, I go exposure maybe to 10, and I panel and I look through selected, and I just want to do maybe a left rim light. So I select this, I go to the left. I'm always checking my lighting like this, and I go back a bit, maybe like this, and then I gotta increase my light exposure maybe to 18. Okay, so this would be my pretty strong rim light, which will be maybe my sunset light. So I'm also replicating the lighting we had before. And then I go into light number 2. I look through selected as well, and I change my lighting intensity maybe to 18 as well. And this would be kind of my side light, which will be my hero light direction. Maybe something like this, so we have a nice key, a nice key from the left, and then a rim from the right. You can go a bit higher up, maybe like that. I think this will work. And now let's just assign shaders to everything, and then we just have light 3, and I'm just hiding this for now, and hitting save and going into the perspective. And when I select the curve collector, there's a few options. So we have ribbon as a type, and we have a shader as well. So in the shader, I just click the checkerboard, go to my favorites, or I go to Arnold tab and look for the standard surface shader. So this is now assigned. You can see it looks directly differently. And then for my little spheres, I want to assign a shader for those 2. I right click, assign favorite material, standard surface shader, and I'll do the same for the bubble head, like that, standard surface shader. Alright, so now if I select my my water, my droplet shader, render 100%, so I can see them in action, and I just isolate them, and you can see we are rendering depth of field on the fly, which is pretty nice. So that's the bubble head. So now let's just make sure that we bring in the transmission to 1, which will make these water droplets appear like water. So what we got to do is change the roughness to 0.05 maybe, so it's not too rough in the refraction. And this would be a typical water droplet. Nothing fancy, and they disappear because we don't have any background stuff going on, but we will change that in a bit. So on the bubble head itself, I can make it like a 18% gray shader, so we just change this to 0.18 like that, and adjust the roughness if we need to, make it a lot rougher like that, and we can add a coating or what have you. So if I do that, coating on, we get a nice look, kind of a metallic now, but that's totally fine. We can change our albedo to be a red guy or whatever. For now, we just leave it as this. And for the spider web, what I did, actually I almost kept it on the default standard shader. You can use a hair shader if you need to, but it's so defocused, you don't see any detail on the spider web anyway, so I just left it almost as it was. I think the only thing I did, I changed the mode in the curve collector to be a thick, which is actually a geometry thickness. It's like a geometry, like a poly mesh almost, so you get nicer spec hits on this guy, especially on the side lighting like this. And all you gotta do, you can change the color if you need to. You can change the IOR a bit, maybe make it a bit more metallic or whatever. If you this is very creative, right? So it's up to you what you want to do with this. And last but not least, what I did, I just created another light. This can be honestly anything. It's just where he should be placed in what environment, because there's such a strong depth of field on this guy. Everything will be really blurry, so all you gotta do is just add some ambient lighting with some texture. So what I chose was like a HDRI, which is almost like a forest. I have quite a few in here. I'm actually not sure what forest is. Let's just have a look. So forest, you can see it looks like that. And yeah, let's just try how this guy looks. So hitting render, you can see it gets very orange already, and you can see the depth of field is really kicking in, and you don't see anything really. It's nice and warm colors. You can rotate it until you find something more interesting, maybe something like that would work, I guess. And based on what you want to see and how much you want to defocus or how much detail you want to retain, you can change all of that. You can have this a lot darker, and I think I can do that by just going -1 in here, so I'm reducing the exposure of that light. We still get everything here, and you can see the spider web is a bit too white, I would say. We can also adjust the depth of field if you think you're losing too much detail, and especially in the foreground. So in my camera, I can just dial down the defocus by changing the aperture. So we can go maybe down to 5 and see what this looks. So we get a lot more detail back on the spider web, which is interesting. But I think I like the very macro style of look, so I go back up to 10, and this is kind of now what we have. I can change the just remove the code for now, just to see what this looks, and bring in some scattering. So if I bring subsurface scatter in here, make sure maybe we choose let's say we just go for catch up, and then we adjust it. So let's do a scale of 0.1. Let's go even less, 0.01. So now it feels almost very plasticky. So let's just let's just make it actually like a kind of grayscale plastic, like that, which have some kind of skin color, whatever, so it gets a bit of red tint. We can boost it, and then we change it to something, I don't know, not so red for sure, maybe something green. And then I think the weight is way too strong, so maybe 0.025, so it's not scattering as much, maybe like that, or 0.1, really subtle like that. And now we have a kind of a green little Spider-Man here, and we can change the overall color so it's a bit darker, and we can bring back the coat just to get the nice specular response to this, so it feels like a coated plastic like that. And let's just dial back in the shader for the spider web. It's because I said it's maybe too white. It does not catch any transmission. So you can try to bring in transmission fully to 1, and now you can see that it's actually refracting the environment, and you can see the colors are nicely in here, and everything feels a bit more localized to the setting. And let's just, if I render this little region here and I change my settings to be maybe 10, you can see now we get the nice detail in here, and everything looks a bit nicer. So for the final render, what I actually did, I set up a adaptive render, which means I can actually specify my minimum render settings, my minimum samples, let's do 4, and then a maximum of maybe let's do 25. And based on that, Arnold is clever enough to know when to sample more or less to certain regions. So if I render this, you can see it might take a bit longer, but you can see now we almost get these shapes, the bokeh out there pretty nicely. So if I go up to maybe 40, we can see if this gets better or not. If it doesn't get better, we need to reduce our threshold. And it got a bit better, so I can just dial it down very slightly, maybe 0.04, which will give this region more samples to render. And it's not perfect yet. You still get these little hot fireflies. And what you can do, you can actually clamp the AA samples and make sure that you maybe clamp at a value of 3 or something, so you don't get these super hot reflections and fireflies. And this should almost iron out all the fine noise you have. So let's render maybe something which is very defocused, like maybe the background right here. And it takes a bit of time, because obviously we go for final render settings. If I look at this 1:1, it's pretty clean, right? So if I render this the guy from the front, he should be like super clean. Takes a bit of time. So a bit of time, I mean 23 seconds. If you record a tutorial, it's always time, and I sit around and wait for it to finish. But anyways, so this is now how it looks, and I think it looks pretty decent just based on the time I spent on this, which is almost no time at all. So let's just render the whole thing for final, and then I'll be back. Right on. So after 4 minutes, which is in production time, it's like nothing. It's like a fraction of time. The render is done, and we actually rendered depth of field. Obviously, it's still a bit noisy here in a very defocused spots. Typically, you will not render depth of field just because you don't have the freedom to change the focal points. So this would be anyways a compositing trick you would do. You would do it like a 2D depth of field, or even with a D-pass. But this is kind of what it is, and this is also pretty close to what I rendered for my final image right here. If I can get this framed again. I'm not a big fan of this tool. I can't fully work with this. There we go. So this is, I added obviously a bit more lighting. I added like a warm light. It's super easy to do. Just change the Kelvin colors and whatnot, and you get these nice effects as well. And I boosted the render settings a bit more in this, but you can see it's still working very well. And this is yeah, so this sums up the tutorial. And before you leave, I am providing all the scene files, all the Alembic caches. You will get the Houdini scene file and you will also get the Maya scene file and the final rendered image, which is this one. And this will be available on my Patreon channel. So if you want to play around, see the scene files I set up, you can get them from there easily by just signing up for the source files tier. And obviously, as I said before, you will get access to all previous source files too. So this is not just for this one-off thing, it's for the whole package. So, and also my Katana sessions and everything is on Udemy, so be sure to check it out and support me. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you in the next lesson.